Would you like to accelerate your career and reach your full potential in just minutes a day? Welcome to the LEADx Show with New York Times best-selling author and Inc. 500 entrepreneur, Kevin Kruse.
How can you use mindfulness to break bad habits? Hello everyone, Kevin Kruse here, and in just a minute we're going to talk about why we get hooked on things and how we can break bad habits. But first, don't forget to visit LEADx.org, where you'll find hundreds of articles from the best leadership and career experts out there. And while you're there, sign up for our quick read newsletter. It's packed with actionable tips you can try out right away. LEADx.org. Friends, I am so excited for today's guest. He is the Director of Research at the Center for Mindfulness and Associate Professor in Medicine and Psychiatry at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. He is a globally recognized psychiatrist and expert in mindfulness who has developed and tested novel mindfulness programs for addictions. He has studied the underlying neural mechanisms of mindfulness using standard and real-time fMRIs. His work has been featured on 60 Minutes, Time Magazine, Forbes, BBC, and many other places. His TED Talk was the fourth most viewed of all TED Talks in 2016. His new book is The Craving Mind, From Cigarettes to Smartphones to Love, Why We Get Hooked and How We Can Break Bad Habits. Our guest, of course, is Dr. Judson Brewer. Judson, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So we're going to talk about the craving mind in just a minute, but I always ask our guests if they'll be kind enough to share a time when you actually failed, maybe early in your career. So, we want to hear what lesson did you learn so that we can learn from that experience too.
Which time? So I think what comes to mind immediately is, the first big grant proposal that I put in, and I thought it was awesome, and my reviewers didn't think it was quite so awesome, so it got rejected. And the NIH has a standard process for doing this, so that we get peer review and the theoretically the best grants get funded. What I learned from that was, one of the main take-home messages for me was to really see what it was like to get that rejection and feel like how I was angry at my reviewers and how I was wondering whether I could do this, and all of these ways in where I was getting in my own way, when in fact I could look right in front of me and the reviews were saying, hey, do this, this, and this. And if I could step back and say, oh, this is a learning process rather than something to get angry about or to beat myself up over, I can move forward. And it was tremendously helpful for, learning, oh, this is not something to be taken personally.
Yeah, I think that's really a great takeaway. The outcome wasn't what you expected, but that doesn't mean you're a failure or even that you failed. It was information. It was information that you could act on.
Yes.
So Judson, your new book is The Craving Mind. And you say that, whether we're addicted to heroin or cigarettes or video games or even love, the same mechanisms are at work. And your model, you call it the reward-based learning model. And I wish we could put you in front of a whiteboard so all of our listeners could see you, but we can't do that. So can you try to describe your reward-based learning model and also the role of dopamine in our brains?
I'd be happy to. And the nice thing is that this builds on, so it's not necessarily my model. What the book is about is all the different ways in which this reward-based learning process takes place that we might not be noticing. So this is a very evolutionarily conserved process. It was probably set up so we'd remember where food is. So if you think of it as trigger, behavior, reward. So we see some food, we eat some food, it registers in our belly, it says, oh, calories, survival. And that sends a dopamine signal to our brain that says, hey, remember what you ate and where you found it. So this is context-dependent memory. This is context-dependent learning or reward-based learning because it's based on rewards. And this is something that was, not only there for eating, but it's something that's still at play in modern day where food is plentiful.
So, and so tell me a little bit more about the dopamine angle. Where does that come into play?
Dopamine, it seems, is there to help us learn things. So, for example, when something novel happens, we get a spritz of dopamine in our nucleus accumbens. And when this process starts, we get habituated when we have the same thing happens over and over and over. So, for example, slot machines are rigged to provide what's called intermittent reinforcement. So you get the jackpot only certain times, and you don't know when that's going to happen. Well, that's set up to really jack our dopamine system so that we'll get addicted to playing the slots, for example.
And dopamine in the same way, though, whether it's gambling or drugs or other things, I mean, that's like the pleasure chemical that is telling us, hey, whatever you just did, we really liked it. And again, evolutionary speaking, it might not be good for us today, but that's what that signal's about, right?
Yeah, well, I would say, and this is where we can get a little more nuance. The liking versus wanting has now been well differentiated. So there are a number of research groups that have shown, even in animal models, that there are different parts of the brain that get activated when something feels good versus when we want it or need it. So cravings, for example, the hit of when we eat chocolate, it tastes good, for example. There's that liking quality, and when we have this driving need to, I have to eat chocolate, doesn't necessarily feel as good as that taste of chocolate itself. So we can start to differentiate the difference between that liking and that wanting, and that wanting is what drives behavior.
Right, that wanting or that craving. So what is basically the practice of mindfulness, and how can we use it to break our bad habits?
Mindfulness is really about paying attention to all aspects of our experience, but in particular, we can pay attention to the push and pull of craving. So if there's something pleasant and we want more of it, we kind of hold on to it, or we move toward it, or we try to get it. If there's something unpleasant, we want it to go away as quickly as possible. So there's also movement there. So there's the push and pull. Mindfulness is really about noticing that push and pull and not getting caught up in that movement. So just being with whatever is in a way that's curious more than driven.
Is it fair to say, like, in a non-judgmental way, just being aware of it?
Yes. So I think curiosity is non-judgmental. It just says, what's going on here, as compared to, I don't like this, or I want more of this. Okay,
good. And obviously, a lot of the listeners on the LEADx show, they're business managers, frontline managers, executives, and we often talk about the modern day sort of everyday, I think, addictions to things like social media, email. I'm always, whenever I ask people what's getting in the way of your productivity at work, it's either meetings or email. And sometimes I'll say, yeah, but I think you're part of the email problem. Really productive people, they process their email. They don't check it, throughout the day. Sometimes I think it's a fear of missing out, FOMO. They don't want to miss something that's happened in their email inbox, and you'll tell me, maybe there's a dopamine hit associated with checking email or not. But how would we specifically try to break this bad habit of constantly jumping on email or Facebook or whatever our vice is at work?
Right. I think these really are our everyday addictions. We've never had instant access to email before. If we carry around our phone or if we're in front of our computers, we never know when we're going to get another email that pops up, especially if we have those email alerts on. That's like the slot machine saying ding, ding, ding. And so we get pulled to check our email. Or even if we don't check it at that moment, we still get that pull that says, oh, you have a new email. Maybe you should see what it is, because we don't know. There's this, like you talked about, the FOMO. So where mindfulness comes in is it helps us start by saying, well, what do I get from this? Really paying attention. Again, this is reward-based learning. So paying attention to these rewards. What do I get when I'm constantly pulled to check my email? What do I get when I'm worried that I'm going to miss something if I haven't checked my email in the last 5 minutes? And we can really see, well, what's it feel like when I'm worried? Well, I'm worried. That doesn't feel very good. And how's my productivity when I'm constantly checking in, to see what my emails are versus staying really on one task? I call this unitasking.
Right.
As compared to multitasking. It feels good when we're totally immersed in a project and we're just we're just doing it. And I think there are very simple ways to manage email. I even do this myself is, okay, every, X number of hours, I'll take a break from what I'm doing and I'll check my email. I turn off all the alerts, turn off all the things that can distract me, and just say, okay, now's the time for something different. And let's just hammer through a bunch of emails and go back to what I'm doing after that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And listeners, if you're thinking, well, I just can't be off of email, my job's different. I can't be off of email for very long. Even if you're just doing, a one working jam session a day, your first half hour or hour when you're in the office, where you just stick that phone on airplane mode or stick it in your desk drawer, no notifications going on, and unitask, as Dr. Brewer just described it, I think that could, really boost productivity. Justin, I want to hit you with it's actually a personal question, but hopefully listeners will benefit from it as well. So this really happened. I had an event down, I live in Philadelphia, I had an event down in DC. I hopped on the train and that's when I read your book, getting ready for this interview. So I read your book, got down to DC and finished it when I got to the event and was waiting. Did an event, missed lunch, missed afternoon snacks and things because I was presenting. Get back to the train station in DC, and I've got like an hour to kill before my train takes me back home. And so I'm hungry. It's dinner time. Go to the restaurant, and I'm trying to lose maybe 4 or 5 pounds right about now. And I think, all right, let me get some fish tacos. I eat some fish tacos. I promise there is a point to this story. And when I was done with the fish tacos, I had a real bad craving for nachos. Uh-huh. And it wasn't hunger because I had just eaten the fish tacos. I wasn't hungry, and I was getting ready, and my food vice tends to be salty rather than the chocolate. And I'm like, I wonder if I should just tell the waiter, now I want a plate of nachos even after I just finished these fish tacos. And then all of a sudden I remembered your book, and I said, well, let me just get mindful for a second as an amateur. And I said, okay, how am I feeling? What's going on? And my feet hurt and my back hurt. And then, emotionally, psychologically, I realized like I got an hour to kill before this train leaves and I'm kind of bored, or I'm going to be kind of bored. And I just sort of tuned in to what I was feeling physically, emotionally. And in this case, like that craving went away. Like the craving for the nachos just went away, and I didn't order the nachos. Now, the rest of the story, though, is I get home and I share this story and your book with my girlfriend. She says, maybe you should have just gotten the nachos. And it made me think, like, okay, like we clearly all know when there's like an obvious bad addiction that's, jeopardizing our relationships and our health or our workplace success. But what is the answer of like, do we really need to take action on something or not? Is it like, hey, Kevin, it just depends on how badly you want to lose those 5 pounds, or what is it?
I think that's a really great question. And your description is beautiful because you outlined this trigger behavior reward process where, that trigger might have been anything from, feeling, some pain, feeling boredom, or even just being triggered by other food, or even, I did a great job, presenting, and now's the time to celebrate.
Yes.
There could be 4 or 5 different that all feed in there that say, dude, have some nachos.
Right.
It's nacho time. And you step in there and you can ask that question, what's driving this, right? So is it hunger versus is it all of these other triggers? And do I want to be driven by these? Do I want to be slave to my desires, or do I want to have more control in my life? So it's simple when it's cigarettes, okay, these cancer sticks, probably, not a great way to live my life. I don't have to smoke to survive, but eating's different. And this is actually, we developed an entire program around this called Eat Right Now. And the idea is to change our relationship to eating so that we start by seeing really clearly what that habit loop is and what we get from what we're eating. So for example, you went ahead and you didn't eat the nachos, right?
Right.
So what was that like after you?
It was fine. Feel? It was actually quite fine. I mean, it was really. It sounds weird to say out loud, but it was actually pretty bad. Like craving these nachos for about 5 minutes, but then it just was fine. It went away.
It went away. So it went away. And what's it feel like to know that you don't have to eat the nachos every time?
Well, I was amazed at that, and I think that's something I would want to be able to do more. And not to interrupt what you're already teaching me, but I think my challenge is
remembering
to be mindful the next time I have that craving.
Yes. Yeah. The ancient word for mindfulness is literally, the literal translation is to remember. So, it's really about seeing these things clearly and remembering to be present with what's actually happening so that everything else takes care of itself. So the awareness says, oh, I'm not hungry. I don't have to eat this stuff. This is a craving that comes and goes. Let me get curious about it, for example.
Right.
Oh, and then we notice the body sensations as we ride that craving out. So that's what mindfulness is all about. The nice thing is we can actually use this as a way to tap into the same reward-based learning process. So instead of that trigger of just say stress or whatever, triggering the nacho, eat some nachos and then, maybe feeling a temporarily okay, but your gut might not feel so good. We switch that up, same trigger, but the behavior is getting curious. Oh, what's this feel like in my experience right now? And there's a reward in that comes from just being curious in itself and even letting go of that craving.
Right.
And there's a further reward that comes with, oh, I'm not a slave to my desires. That's the same process, but it's one that develops self-efficacy as compared to nacho slavery.
I like that. And I'm jotting this note, not a slave to my desire. And I will feel so superior if I can more often resist those nachos. I love that. So, Judson, before we wrap up, I always like to challenge our listeners to get just a little bit better every single day. And I think they really love these conversations. And I want to help them to kind of anchor it and remember it by taking some immediate action. So give us a challenge. What's something that we could do right away in our lives?
Well, I love that you challenge your listeners to do this. So I would say, just like with our Eat Right Now program, I would encourage people to find what their own habits are that they are pulled from, that they're slave to, and simply pay attention. Start by asking themselves, what do I get from this? Whether it's, eating the nachos or not eating the nachos, both of those are different rewards, and we can pay attention to those rewards clearly and really see what we're getting. So if we eat the comfort food, what do I get from this? If we don't eat the comfort food, what do I get from this? How are they different? So that's what I would encourage people to do. Simply pay attention as you do whatever that habitual behavior is. Bring awareness to that.
I love it. I love it. What's the best way our listeners can find out more about you, your book? I know you've got an app out. Give it all to us.
There's a judsonbrewer.com completely self-referential website that has links to all of these things. The eating program is goeatrightnow.com. People can learn more about that. The book can be found on Amazon or other places. It was published by Yale University Press. It's called The Craving Mind, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show. So those are three places that people can get started.
All right, friends, you've just been mentored by none other than Dr. Judson Brewer, one of the world's leading experts on mindfulness. How cool is that? Don't forget, you can get the links he mentioned and notes from this interview over at leadx.org. You can get Dr. Brewer's book from amazon.com or your favorite bookstore. And don't forget, listeners, do me one big favor. If you haven't already, subscribe to this show and leave a short, honest review. It'd mean the world to me. Until next time, remember, of course, leadership is about influence. It's not about your title or even authority. We are all leaders. The question is, what kind of leader will you be?